Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we welcome Dr. Kernard Elst from Belgium, and he is a very prominent personality, not only in Europe but in India and Asia too. We are very lucky to have him today. We missed him a couple of weeks back, mainly because of some technical reasons. So first of all, I would like to say that he is a Belgian Orientalist and friend of Hindu Dharma. He explores into enduring relevance to other world culture, here especially the native European culture. Now, today's topic is old folk customs and similarities in Indo-European religions. I will not go more into details because we will be losing time, and I want that he should give his talk straight away. So welcome, Doctor. Please go ahead and you can begin.
Right. So I owe a specific thanks to Surendraji for saving the day last time around when we were being bedeviled by technical problems. But so now I think I dare assure you that this won't happen again. Okay, here we go. Share screen. Yes. Yes. So we're going to compare the Hindu deity Shiva with the Germanic deity Wodan as the sort of backbone of whole narrative of comparative mythology, how the pantheon in India is similar to the one in the North European world. Yeah, the date 18 November is, of course, when this talk was supposed to take place. Now we are in December, 18 December, oh my God, yeah. Anyway, 18 December, so you read that correctly, it's 18 December today. So here we go. There is a certain genealogy of languages in mankind. All languages are ultimately very dimly related. You see, the linguists speak of a world language that was spoken maybe 80,000 years ago, and that brought together the ancestresses of such different languages as the Khoisan or Bushman language, with Chinese, with Sanskrit, and all the other languages. But so that commonality is very distant. There are about 40 word roots identified by linguists as being in common between more or less all the languages. Like, for instance, you have dick or dick, which is known in Latin, for instance, as digitus, which means finger, or deiknumi in Greek, which means to point, to show. And so you have deductions of that same root in pretty much every language with more or less the same meaning. Well, there are about 40 of that, like the root milk, which has a clear English meaning, is from an ultimate root, mulg, or something like that, which has related meanings in different languages. Sometimes it means throat, sometimes it means to swallow, sometimes it means mother's breast. But anyway, they all ultimately are related to this meaning milk or suckle. But you see, that's a very long way off. the languages got differentiated along with the cultures that they were the expression of. And so closer to our own time, we still have a family of languages about 6,000 years old. That is the Indo-European language family. So Hindu culture is dimly related to all cultures in the world, but most closely to those that are vehiculated by an Indo-European language. And the famous example of a common expression that is still present in a number of Indo-European languages is the expression undying fame, kleos angritom, or something. That's what it must have sounded like 6,000 years ago. It's better known in the Greek version, kleos aptiton, or in the Sanskrit version, shravas akshitam, which means undying fame. That expression is quite popular and is very easy to preserve because in all the poetry that we have preserved, this was an important theme. You see, this was the job of the poets to confer on their employers undying fame. You see, if you were a king and you fought a strategic battle and you won, well, that's nice, but one generation further on, it would be forgotten. And so it was the job of the poets to cast the memory of this victory in a pleasing form, one that people would be eager to preserve, you see, to keep singing, to keep reciting, so that the experience of this victory was eternalized, was perpetuated. A more mundane achievement of the Indo-Europeans, and one that explains to a large extent their exceptional expansion from the Atlantic Ocean to the Bay of Bengal, or the reverse, is the invention of the wheel and therefrom of the wagon. Because this allowed them to spread. And so later on, of course, these inventions were taken over by others. But by that time, the Indo-Europeans had already settled in an area from the Atlantic Ocean to the Bay of Bengal. Right. Now, if we find common elements between India and Europe, in some cases, you may think of a transmission. You see, maybe the invention was done in India and then it was transmitted to Europe. Sometimes this is the case. Like you see in Greek philosophy, that several important philosophers acknowledge an influence from India. Sometimes it is also just too conspicuous to be missed. Like, for example, Pythagoras, the oldest Greek philosopher, he had some kind of ashram, a living community where people could become members and submit to the community's discipline. Like, for example, you were expected to observe a mauna vrata, that is to say, an oath of silence, for 5 years. You know, the first 5 years you could only listen and learn. You were not supposed to say anything. The dietary prescriptions were exactly like in India, Jainism. Like you see, the Jains don't eat meat, but they also don't eat just any vegetable. Certain vegetables are also taboo to them. And so you find these rules practically identical in the community of Pythagoras. You have other philosophers like Pyrrho, or like the Stoic philosophers who similarly, or Plotinus, the great ideologue of the Neoplatonist school, you see that are quite explicit about having borrowed from India. Something totally different is the Bundestru Cauldron. You see, this was an artifact discovered in Denmark, but thought to have been made in Bulgaria. And its depictions are quite interesting. So it's compartmentalized in a number of paintings or depictions, both on the inside and on the outside. Two of them very explicitly point to India. The best known one is the one shown here on top. The Pashupati, the lord of the animals. In Celtic, it is called, or he is called Kernunos, with the root kernu, which means a horn. And so he's the horn god. He's still worshipped today by the Vikas, a certain neo-pagan sect. So the horns on one side refer to the animals. The deer have horns, cattle have horns. On the other hand, it also refers to the moon. It's a male moon god, because the crescent moon looks like a pair of horns. So in India, we have depictions going back 4,000 or 5,000 years of Pashupati, the lord of the animals, where we have a seated deity with the crescent moon on his head, seated between a number of animals. Here we have more or less the same thing. Then there is a second painting that points even more directly to India. It is that of Gaja Lakshmi. I see any Hindu present here will immediately know what this refers to. You see the goddess of prosperity, Lakshmi or Shri, is seated in between two elephants, and she gets a shower from the trunks of these two elephants. So this is depicted on the back here. On the upper side, on the inner side of the cauldron. So you see her seated in between two elephants. Probably the sculptor who made this image had not seen elephants with his own eyes. It was hearsay, because you can't be mistaken that this means elephants. On the other hand, you also have to notice that they are not exactly depicted as they are. They are too slender. So they have a trunk, they have heavy legs and so on, but their body is not big enough for a real elephant. So probably this was made outside India, but to an Indian theme.
Doctor, please move the slides. You are not moving the slide. They can't see the slide.
Oh, have you seen this one, this map? Have you seen this one, the title?
No, it is on the first is stuck. We are stuck on the first.
And this one? This is the second one.
No, you are, yeah, it's not moving. You are still on the first slide.
And it should be in slideshow mode.
Yeah, but it is, or at least on my screen it is.
Yeah,
Here it is not moving.
Well, what to do? No, we have to solve this.
Do you want
Okay.
me to? Do you want me to open it?
No, I'll first try to get this properly. Okay, share screen. You see a screen now?
Yes.
A title page?
Yes.
Yeah, but not yet in presentation mode, right?
No, you move it to the second slide, it'll come automatically.
Okay.
Or you click on the second slide.
This is the
yeah,
second
now,
slide.
Yes, now we can see it.
Now you can see it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And now can you see the presentation mode?
Yes, we can see it.
No,
Now
no,
you
not
see.
yet in presentation mode. No, not yet. Not yet.
No. But can you see the second slide?
Yeah, that we can see. Yes.
Well, that's at least a step in the right direction. So this is about most Indian and European languages. The language vehiculates a culture and a mythology, so you may expect great similarities there as well. Now you can see the Bundestru Cauldron. Can you?
No, we can't see it.
No, you can't see it. Okay.
No, the
Well,
slide is stuck. Slide is stuck.
okay, and now can you see the second Indo-European language family?
Yes, we can see. Yes.
Okay, then the next one, the
Yeah, now we
Bundestru
can see. Yeah,
Cauldron.
it has moved now. Yeah, okay, we can see now. The third
Okay.
slide. All right.
Right, so this was the Bundestru Cauldron with Indian depictions on it, unmistakably. So sometimes there is transmission, like these philosophical schools, they borrow from India, or some themes on the Bundestru Cauldron. But many more times, what you notice is a common origin. The great theoretician of this common origin was the French mid-20th century scholar Georges Dumézil. So he spoke about Indo-European trifunctionality. He saw a division in three in all spheres of Indo-European culture. So in society, he saw three classes: the priestly class, the martial class, and the production class. As they said in the Middle Ages, the one prays, another fights, and another bakes, makes bread. They are part of a whole cosmology that divides everything in three. The priestly class corresponds to heaven. The martial class, where everything is moving and dynamic, corresponds to the atmosphere, where everything is moving. And the productive class is far more sedentary. It's related to the earth, which is static. And so heaven means above, earth means down, and atmosphere means the middle. Heaven is related with white, with transparency. The atmosphere with red, with moving, with dynamism, and the earth with black, with static. And so the Sanskrit terms for this are sattva, truthful in the sense of transparent. Rajas, meaning dust particles in the air. So troubled, not entirely dark. It leaves through some light, but it also deforms it. And then you have black or tamas, meaning inertia, heaviness. Now his discovery is that you find the same scheme in Roman texts, in Scandinavian texts, as well as in India. And so, for example, the flag of the island Man, which is an island in between England and Ireland. And so the flag shows these three legs that you see here on the left. So it's a scheme that is known in Europe as triskel. Triskel means having three legs. A variation on it is tetraskel, where you have four legs. That scheme is better known as the swastika, right? But so the basic scheme is with three poles. Here, three legs. Similarly, in Scandinavia, you have the so-called Valknut, literally the knot of the fallen, which is associated with Wodan. And so it brings together three poles, one above, one below, one white, one black, but also one to the side, red. And so that third one creates a dynamism. You see, the third one has to be either on the left or on the right. It has to make a choice. The other two don't. And so it is partisan. It is either leftist or rightist, so to speak. It triggers a movement either clockwise or counterclockwise. So this matter of choice, of being partisan, that's typically rajasic. That's typical for the dynamic pole. Right. You've seen the change of page, I hope. So the general similarities within Indo-European. So you have a cognate framework. You see, the basic conceptual schemes are the same. You have a very similar pantheon. It's easy to recognize the gods of one country in the gods of another country. And you find the same key narratives. Sometimes you have a narrative that is overlaid on a historical event, but the narrative is much older than the event. And so when something happened that seemed to relate to it, it was sort of fixed. You see, they moved things around so that the narrative would fit the events. Like you have in about 1200 BC, the Trojan War, where the Greeks besieged the city of Troy. That's a real historical event. Or you have the Kurukshetra battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, the pretenders to the Bharata throne. That's also a real historical event. The date is much disputed, but I settle for the 15th century BC. Then later poets wrote about this battle, and this gradually became an epic. So Homer did that for the Trojan War about 500 years after the war. For the Kurukshetra battle, the Mahabharata epic grew, and that may have taken more than 1,000 years before it was complete. But so in both war descriptions, though they are about very different wars, you find a number of themes in common, and we shall see a number of examples. Now, first, a few other examples. A very typical thing throughout the Indo-European world is the story of the thunder god who kills a dragon. So you have in the Vedas Indra, the thunder god who kills the dragon Vrtra. Then among the Greeks, you have the monster Typhon, who gets killed by Zeus. Zeus, again, is the thunder god. The son of Zeus, and mind you, in mythologies, being the son of another god or the brother of another god means that you have essentially the same characteristics. So the son Heracles of Zeus, he resembles Zeus. He has more or less the same properties. So he also kills a dragon. He kills a sea monster. And so the background story is that a king is sentenced to sacrificing his own daughter to the sea monster, but Heracles comes to save her. Among the Germanic people, we have the story of Donar or Thor, the storm god. His son Siegfried, again having the same characteristics, kills the dragon. And you have a similar story in England about Beowulf. Beowulf is a hero with the same masculine, brave, characteristics as the thunder god. And he kills the dragon Grendel. And in fact, in his fight against the dragon Grendel, you find a number of themes exactly the same as in the Rig Veda, with Indra killing Vrtra. Like in both cases, the dragon's mother plays a crucial role. This theme is a bit larger than the Indo-European world. Like in Babylon, which is not Indo-European but Semitic, you find the myth of Marduk. Marduk, among the stars, signifies the planet Jupiter. Jupiter or Zeus or Indra is, of course, the thunder god. Okay, he kills the sea monster Tiamat. We have a Turkic version of the same story and so on. So this is a very widespread story. But at any rate, the Sanskrit version corresponds to similar stories elsewhere. Another very important story that shows up in different, very similar versions. The creation of the world. Now, mind you, the world is not really created. As the oldest Hindu philosophy, Sankhya, says, neither consciousness nor nature is created. Both are eternal. And so creation does not really mean creation from zero. It means the creation of an orderly world emerging from a chaotic world. Anyway, but so, we can theologically split hairs about the exact meaning of creation. But the story goes like this. There are twin brothers. Somehow they are already there. There are twin brothers, and they create the world by means of a sacrifice. Namely, the one brother sacrifices the other brother. So the two brothers are called, in the oldest version known, Mano and Yemo. Mano means the man. And so in Sanskrit we have Manu. Manu is the patriarch of mankind, the ancestor of the Vedic sages. And we have Yemo. In Sanskrit, we have Yama, the god of death. Why the god of death? Well, you see, he's the twin brother who gets sacrificed, who dies. The other one has eternal life, but Yemo dies. And so Yemo starts to mean mortal, or the god of death in Sanskrit, or in Iranian, the first mortal. And so it comes to mean men, mortal men. Anyway, so the basic meaning is they are twin brothers, and the one, Mano, sacrifices the other, Yemo. So Yemo is mortal. He signifies the pole of becoming, of changing, of growth and decline, whereas Manu is immortal. Later in Hindu philosophy, this will become the pole of consciousness, which is immortal, versus the pole of nature, which is mortal. In nature, we see constantly things being born, growing, then decaying, and finally dying. Of course, they're constantly replaced by new beings, but there we see the process of decay. Whereas in the world of consciousness, we see permanence, we see eternality. In Greek mythology, you also have twin brothers, the Dioskuroi, meaning the divine young men. And so one of them, Pollux or Polydeicus, is immortal. His twin brother Castor is mortal. In the Germanic mythology, Yemo becomes Ymir, and so Ymir is killed. The world is created from the parts of Ymir's body. And so His skull becomes the heavenly vault. His feet becomes the earth's surface. His bones become the mountains. His veins become the rivers. His eyes become sun and moon, and so on. In Rome, many myths are turned into history. You know, somewhat fabulous history or confabulated history, but nevertheless, there is a certain transformation, but you can still recognize the original theme. So you have twin brothers, Romulus and Remus. Remus is an assimilation to Romulus coming from Yemus. So here again, we have the twin brother Yemo. And so while building the city, they pick a quarrel and Romulus kills Remus. So here, after some transformation, you get again the same theme that creation results from a sacrifice. This Yama character, the mortal, appears in the Vedas in different embodiments. And so the most famous one is Purusha. The Purusha Sukta describes how eternal man creates a certain map, a certain scheme that you find back in the universe, and also in a slightly lesser whole, a lesser cosmos, namely society. And so both at the cosmic and at the societal level, the whole is structured just like the human body. So the way you can divide the human body in a head and feet and arms and so on, you can divide society into its different components, the priestly class, the working class, the entrepreneurial class. And similarly, you can divide the physical cosmos into the heavenly vault, the earthly surface, the rivers, the mountains, sun and moon, and so on. This is a worldview that is called corporatism. This means you relate both the world and society to the human body. We know this story not only from the Rig Veda. You see the missionaries and other enemies of Hinduism who say, oh, the Rig Veda is so terrible, look at the Purusha Sukta. But in fact, in Christianity, you have the same corporatist view. In the New Testament, Saint Paul says explicitly that all the parts of human society have to work together, just like the parts of the body have to work together. You see, you will get nowhere if the cells of your stomach start saying, no, no, I want to be a brain cell. You see, all the parts of the body need each other. All of them are necessary. And they're different, but they need each other. Right? So in the 19th century, when socialism emerged with its doctrine of class struggle, the Catholic Church answered against that with the corporatist worldview developed by Saint Paul, namely that the classes have to work together, that they need each other, the harmony model. Right. And so this story is very common, and you find it also outside the Indo-European world. Like in China, you have in the myth of Pangu, the giant Pangu, you have the same idea that his skull becomes the heavenly vault, and his bones become the mountains, and his eyes become the sun and moon, and so on, with the additional detail that the fleas on his skin become mankind. You see, today, the deep ecologists say that man is some kind of a vermin on the skin of Mother Earth. Well, that's not a new idea. The ancient Chinese already said it. Right, now more similarities. the thunder god masks himself. You see, the gods in general, thunder gods in particular, have the power to take on any shape. So they can mask themselves. Now, in the funny, entertaining stories that poets created around the known character of the gods, this power is used by the thunder god in order to seduce women. So Indra, the thunder god, he impersonates the sage Gautama because he wants to seduce Gautama's wife, Ahilya. And so she's very faithful. She's very loyal to her husband. So the only thing that Indra can do to seduce her is to take on the shape of her husband. And while her husband is out in the forest, he comes home and she thinks it's her husband who's coming home. And so then they make love and so on. And there's a little tail end to it, which, you know, we will see in a minute. But the same story you have with thunder gods elsewhere, like Zeus in Greece. He seduces a whole lot of women by taking on the appropriate shape. Like some woman, you know, takes the shape of a deer in order to flee, but he himself then takes the shape of a masculine deer, and so they end up doing it anyway. Or the very famous one is the princess Europa, after whom our continent is named. So he takes the shape of a bull in order to abduct her. Now you have a similar story in the Germanic lore about Siegfried. He at some moment takes the shape of his friend Gunther in order to seduce the wife of Gunther, Brunhild. So again, you see, he comes home, she thinks he is Gunther. They do it together, and only later she understands that it wasn't Gunther at all, that it was Siegfried. This story is the core of a later philosophical doctrine, the Maya Doctrine, which teaches that everything you see around you is just a shape created, a tamasha, a game created by the gods. So everything you see around you is just an illusion. And I say later, but that's not even sure. Maybe that philosophical content is already present from the beginning. Like you have, for instance, Indra often depicted in the Vedas with the Vajra. Vajra means lightning. And so the lightning is, of course, the obvious weapon of the thunder god. Now that in Buddhism gets elevated to the symbol of instant enlightenment. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's a very popular symbol, the Vajra. And so you see that idea of instant enlightenment may be much older than Buddhism, may already be consciously envisaged in the Vedas. Anyway, a related mythological theme is that the thunder god is masculine par excellence. You see, he scares you, he impresses you, like a man ideally does to a woman. And you see then, because this theme is so well known, of the very masculine thunder god, the poets start to make variations on this and challenging his manhood. So sometimes the thunder god is forced into the woman's role. Like Thor or Donar has lost at one point his hammer, meaning his lightning. And so he has to penetrate the enemy world by dressing up as a woman. The only way he can get his hammer back. Odysseus, one of the heroes of Homer's Iliad, he infiltrates the walls of Troy. The walls of Troy have a magical quality. You can't penetrate. The Greeks never in 10 years of siege succeed in breaking those walls. It's only when the Trojans themselves break down their wall in order to let in the horse created by Odysseus that the Greeks managed to penetrate. Now, in order to think up this stratagem of the Trojan horse, first Odysseus has to infiltrate Troy, but so no warrior can penetrate those walls. So what does he do? He dresses up as a woman. Then back to India, we were talking about Indra, who seduces Ahilya, the wife of Gautama. Now, when Gautama finds out, he's very angry with Indra, and he curses him. And the curse is a direct attack on his manhood. There are different versions. The one I prefer is that Indra is covered in vaginas. So all over his body, a sprouting of wet openings. And you see, Indra feels very ashamed of what he looks like now. He goes to Brahma and he says, please, you see, do something, I look ridiculous. But, you know, Brahma says, well, you know, when a sage casts a curse, that's final. There's nothing you can do about it. However, what I can do, you see, I will take all these openings and put an eye into it. So instead of Indra with 1,000 vaginas, you will be known as Indra with 1,000 eyes, which was a description of the god that already existed, because the starry sky is like some conscious being with 1,000 eyes, you know, looking at us through every star. Right. Similarly, Arjuna, who is the son of Indra, he gets cursed for 1 year. He has to hide, and he masks as a eunuch, as a dance teacher to the princesses. But so again, you see, it's an assault on his manhood, which after a year he recovers. That's what he's divine for. Then another similarity, near invulnerability. A number of gods go through the same event, namely they are made invulnerable, except at a tiny spot. Like in the Mahabharata, Mother Gandhari, she wears a blindfold, not to be superior to her husband who is blind. But so after years of tapas, of asceticism, of denying herself the pleasure of seeing, her eyes have become very strong. And so when she takes off her blindfold, she can charge whatever she sees with a lot of strength and make whatever she sees invulnerable. So she proposes to her son Duryodhana, okay, you appear for me naked so that I can see all of you, and all of you will become invulnerable. Unfortunately, Duryodhana talks to Krishna, who says, yeah, but you see, to appear naked before your mother, that's so indecent. You at least have to put on a loincloth. So Duryodhana does that. And so he becomes invulnerable, except for the part covered by the loincloth. And that's where later he gets killed. Balder, among the Germanic people, he extracts a promise from all plants that they will not be forged into an arrow that will kill him. But he forgets the mistletoe. And so someone makes an arrow out of a mistletoe, and that arrow kills him. Siegfried, he kills the dragon, then he takes a bath in the blood of the slain dragon, but unfortunately a leaf falls on his shoulder, and later that is where he gets killed. Achilles is immersed as a baby in a magic potion, by his mother, but she holds him up by the heel. And so it's in his heel that he gets killed. Then Krishna has practically the same experience. The sage Durvasa, whom he meets, wants to make him invulnerable by applying some Ayurvedic paste to his whole body. But during the procedure, he stands on his feet. So again, his feet are not made invulnerable. And later on, decades later, a hunter shoots an arrow into his foot and he dies. So they all get killed through the remaining loophole. We clearly have a common theme here. Right, so there are many, many, many more similarities between the Vedic tradition and the Greek tradition. Like, for instance, the Vedic sage Dirghatamas is described as blind, which is very strange because his hymns typically are about the starry sky. He describes a number of astronomical insights. Now, it's very hard to do astronomy when you're blind. And Homer similarly is described as blind. Now, what does blindness in this case mean? I suggest that it means that they close their eyes. During meditation, you close your eyes. And that's how you become wise. That's how you have something important to say. That's how you become a sage. A very obvious similarity. In the Ramayana, the crux of the story is that Rama's wife, Sita, gets abducted. And so he goes through a lot of adventures and war in order to win her back. The same thing happens in the Iliad, where Menelaus' wife, Helena, is abducted, and the Greeks go to war for 10 years in order to win her back. You have the story of Admetos, who is saved from death by his wife Alcestis. The story is entirely similar to Satyavan in the Upanishads, who gets saved by his wife Savitri. So there are many similarities. Sometimes there is a clear time arrow that indicates a direction, namely that the European version is younger than the Hindu version. And we will see a very important example right now. This here is Nick Allen. He died last year. I met him a number of times in the French section of my home university. So Université Catholique de Louvain. And he was a philologist, and he was a Dumézilian. I already talked to you about Georges Dumézil, who sees a basic pattern explaining similarities between India and Europe. So he wrote a paper called The Indo-European Roots of Yoga. I must tell you that paper has really changed my life. When I heard of it, I found out that the only version that you could find in Belgium was in the Hari Krishna Castle, about 200 kilometers from my home. I went straight there to find it, and well, it was a revelation. So the core of his discovery is the many, many similarities between two episodes, one in the Mahabharata and one in the Odyssey. And so you have Arjuna's journey to the Himalaya, and then from the Himalaya even vertically up there to Indra's heaven. And another journey by Odysseus from the island of the nymph Calypso, called Ogygia, to the blessed island Scheria. Now, this may be totally new to you, so let me explain. So there are a number of similarities. Nick Allen lists 23 of them. I discovered a few more in the meantime. So both the heroes are suddenly ordered to leave from where they are, namely by Vyasa in the case of the Mahabharata, or by Hermes, the messenger of the gods, for Odysseus. They both have to confront a trident-wielding deity. Shiva, of course, has a trident, but so has Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, or rather of the underworld. But unlike the Indians, the Greeks were mostly living on the sea. They were either on the coast or they were seafaring. They literally had the sea under their feet. So Poseidon becomes a god of the sea, but essentially he's a god of the underworld. In both cases, they have to leave a love-stricken woman behind. A woman who's in love with them, who expects them to marry her, and so on. And so that suddenly can't happen because they have to go. Both of them find high-tech gadgets. Arjuna goes up to heaven to Indra, who confers on him weapons that he will need and use during the upcoming battle. Odysseus, he goes to the islands of a strange population called the Phaiacs, and they have a number of high-tech gadgets, including a self-piloted ship that you don't have to row, that you don't have to speed up with sails. No, you see, that is self-energized, that is automatic, and that takes him straight to his home island of Ithaca, where for 10 years he's been trying to get and never succeeded. But there is a difference between the two. Arjuna's journey is a yogic project. It has a clear yoga dimension, whereas Odysseus' journey does not have that dimension. Now here, let me explain a little bit. The Vedas, the oldest writings in India, already know yoga. They are not a manual of yoga. Yoga is only present here and there, but you can clearly see that the sages already knew about yoga. So here there are, I've given a few quotations. With the mind fixed in the hridaya, in the heart, with visualization. He said in the Rig Veda, then Rig Veda Samhita, it says here, or with one's mind, one should meditate upon the divinities. So Jagarbhyat is from a root that you still find in modern Hindi. Jagrati means awakening. You see, become awakened to. Then with my mind's eye, I can see the divinities. Or it is said, the sages can see with an inward turned mind. So there are quite a few references to meditation. It's not a manual of meditation, but meditation is not foreign to it, unlike what many Western scholars say, that meditation only appears later with the Buddha and so on. No, 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 no. Meditation existed during the Vedic age, and what Nick Allen has shown existed already before the Vedic age. When the Indo-Europeans, the Greeks, the Scandinavians, the Indians were all sitting together in the homeland which is India, according to me. But at any rate, wherever the homeland was, long before the Vedas, they already knew yoga. So yoga is already dimly present in the Vedas, but you find a far more explicit articulation of it in the Mahabharata. And so that's where you find these stories similar to the Greek story. Like, for example, both heroes, Arjuna and in Greece, Odysseus, they have to stand up to a god with a trident. Shiva has a trident, and Poseidon too has a trident. Arjuna has to please Shiva by doing a number of ascetic yoga exercises. Like for a month, he's standing in tree pose, as you can see here on the photograph. That's one I made myself in Mahabalipuram, which is a port city just north of Chennai. That's where Bodhidharma, a famous Buddhist teacher, left India for China and set up Zen Buddhism. Anyway, so long before Bodhidharma, there was already asceticism being practiced by Arjuna. Now, Odysseus too has to defend himself against Poseidon, but for far more mundane reasons. You see, Poseidon is constantly giving him trouble, making his boats sink or lose the way or so, preventing him from getting home. Why? Because he's angry, because the son of Poseidon, who of course has the same character as Poseidon, essentially the same themes, he had a third eye in the middle of his forehead, which Odysseus has poked out. And so for the blinding of his son, Poseidon is angry. But so both are gods with a trident. So Nick Allen concludes, if there is such a similarity, except for the yoga element, what may have happened is that in the original version, there was yoga, both in the Proto-Greek and the Proto-Hindu version, and it was lost in the Greek version. Or alternatively, it was not there at all, neither in the Greek nor the Hindu version, and the Hindu version later developed it. Now, Alan says, I shall argue for the scenario that yoga was originally already there and that the Greeks lost it. But so that originally in the Indo-European stage, yoga was already present. That's also what I say. Right. So you find elements of yoga in Greek as well as Scandinavian stories. We will return to that theme. That's the main theme of this lecture. But first I have to explain something about the gods in India. This is the Vedic Pantheon. How many gods are there in India? You may unmute yourself and say something. Does anybody know how many gods there are for the Vedic sages? Of course, you can see the answer on my screen, but nevertheless, you can make a guess if you want. If you read The Lonely Planet Guide to India, or any other popular introduction to Hinduism, you will find that the Hindus have 330 million gods. That is very commonly said. And yet that is simply a mistake. It is said in the Vedas that there are 33 highest gods, peak gods. And that is in Sanskrit koti. But you see later, when they started doing mathematics to an advanced degree, and they were coining terminology for big numbers, they for the first time coined numbers for million, billion, trillion, and so on. And so a big number they created was 10 million. And for that, they chose the existing word koti. And so this 33 highest gods was mistranslated as 33 times 10 million gods. So 33 330 million in total. But so that's a mistake. There are 33 gods. You have a vertical pole, heaven and earth. Then you have 12 heavenly gods, the Adityas, 8 earthly gods, the Vasus, and between them 11 atmospheric gods, the Rudras. Here are the 12 Adityas. 12 is, of course, a very heavenly number, the 12 seasons, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Literally, it means sons of the infinite. The infinite is called Aditi. The names of those 12 gods can vary. Like in the version I'm showing you now, Indra is included among those 12. In other versions, he's not. And so the names are not that crucial. It is the number 12 that is crucial. Now, 12 is a heavenly number. The heavenly gods have to be 12 in number. Then the atmosphere. Well, let me first say something about the earth. I don't think I return to that. So the earth is, of course, eightfold. You see, 8 is like a cube. It's a very solid square number. So that's a logical number for the earth. But then why the atmosphere 11? You see, 11 is a very unseizable number. Unmanageable number. Like you see, you can draw with compass and ruler a square or a triangle or a dodecagon. But to draw a polygon with 11 angles, now that's very difficult. In fact, that's impossible, right? And so just like the wind is unseizable, you can't put your hands on it. So these 11 are the winds. They're also called pranas, the life breaths. So among them is sometimes Indra. There's also Vayu. Vayu, the wind, is related to the Germanic word vayen, which means to blow. Then Vata, which is one of the elements in Ayurvedic medicine. It corresponds to sattva, the airy element. It's related to the word wind, as well as to the word woeden. Woeden means to rage. And it is in turn related to the god's name, Woden. Then about the Rudras, it is explained, it is rationalized in later writing. Okay, these 11 correspond to the 10 organs in the human body, meaning the 5 sense organs and the 5 action organs, namely excretion, procreation, moving around, using the hands, and speaking. Those are the 5 actions. And so you have the 5 sense organs, together 10, and they are all coordinated by the mind. And I don't mean the intellect, the higher mind, which is typical for human beings, but you see the spontaneous processes of consciousness that you find in animals as well. So those together are the Rudras according to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Okay, now one of the gods is Indra. Indra literally means the rainer. Indu means raindrop. It's the same as Zeus, as Jupiter, as Donar, and their respective sons, because the sons essentially have the same character as the father. He is related to the elephant. He's always depicted on a white elephant. Now you should see when humanity entered India, coming from Arabia, they saw elephants for the first time and they were very impressed. And it is very, very, very certain that they divinized and worshipped the elephant ever since they set foot on India, on Indian soil. So by the time you get the Vedas 5,000 years ago, they worshipped the elephant already for tens of thousands of years. And so in current Hinduism, the elephant is associated with Ganapati. Today, nobody worships Indra anymore. Everybody's forgotten about Indra, but everybody knows about Ganapati or Ganesh. And so he is the god of gods. I mean, literally, Ganapati or Ganesha means the Lord of numbers, of cardinal numbers. So you have different groupings of gods. You have the Rudras, you have the Adityas, you have also lesser beings like the Asuras, like the Maruts, and so on. They are each a Gana, a number, a set, what they call in mathematics and set theory, a set, right? So the Lord of all these sets, the Lord of all the groupings of gods, that is to say the god of gods, that's Ganesha, he's the first god. So he's linked with Indra, and he's also depicted as the son of Shiva. So essentially is also the same character as Shiva. Indra signifies the good storm that is predicted, that is predictable. The storm that opens the monsoon. In April, May, June, you have the hot season in India, extremely dry, extremely hot. And so when on some day in June, the clouds come together and start a rainstorm, you see some people run out, exposing themselves to the big hot raindrops because the rain is so welcome. You see, that's Indra. That's why he's the most important god. Everybody wants him. There is even a hymn about, likening the priests who sing praises to Indra with frogs. Frogs who are croaking and happy the day that the rains fall. You see, the priests are celebrating Indra and the frogs are celebrating the rains, but both of them are very happy when the first storm arrives. Rudra, by contrast, is a very, very similar god. He's also a storm god, but he signifies the unexpected and dangerous storms that come in the mountains. And so here we have him. The name Rudra is rarely used nowadays. It's replaced by the name Shiva. Shiva means the good one, the beneficial one. Like there is an expression, Satyam Shivam Sundaram, the true, the good, and the beautiful. So there you have Shiva in the meaning of good. Now that's a flattering name. That's precisely because he's dangerous. For great tyrants like Aurangzeb or Stalin, you find a whole wealth of songs in their praise. And the poets had better fall in line and start praising them to the utmost, otherwise it would be dangerous for them. So similarly, Rudra, because he's dangerous, he gets flattered with the name Shiva. However, there are other names that remind us again of his fearsome character, like the name Bhairava, which means fearsome. Yes. Now, his association with the atmosphere explains also his association with yoga, because the atmosphere is linked with breath, with the movement of the air, and breath is linked with consciousness. You see, breath is a bridge between nature and consciousness. You can control the breath. It's hard to control your other organs, your other biological functions. You can control them to some extent, but you can't hold up all these physical urges forever. Breath you can control to quite an extent. And so you can prolong your breath, you can hold in or hold out your breath for a few minutes. And so This control of breath is helpful in control of consciousness. So Rudra, the god of the atmosphere, is logically linked with Shiva as the god of yoga. Here we see him on a seal from Harappa, about 4,500 years old, where he sits in meditation pose. Some Western scholars say, oh, but it's not sure that it's meditation. You see, in India, it's very hot, and so very many people are comfortable in positions that in Northern Europe would be very difficult to take, like the lotus pose. Yeah, that's true. But you see, if you look at the entire pose, you can see that this is not a tailor sitting on the floor doing his work. No, this is really somebody meditating. Now it's completely straight with his arms in a symmetrical position, resting, so that he can concentrate. So this is the Adi Yoga, the primeval yogi. And, you know, from the Vedic age or earlier. Also in the Vedas, we find the hymn to Shiva, the Mahamrityunjaya mantra, Triambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushti vardhanam urvarukamiva bandhana mrityor mukshiyama mritate. So it means Om. We worship the three-eyed one. Here there's a little problem, because strictly speaking, you can also translate it as the one with the three mothers. Amba means mother. Aha. Which is a normal thing to say about the moon god. Shiva is a moon god. He has the moon in his hair. And so a male moon god is often depicted with three consorts, or three daughters, or three women, or indeed three mothers, which simply means the three phases of the moon. The first sickle appearing after the new moon, then the full moon, and then the last sickle of the waning moon, just before the next new moon. So that could also be the meaning. Anyway, it certainly means Shiva. And it is said of him that he's well-smelling and growth-promoting. And then you ask of him, let me be liberated from death, not from immortality. Just like a cucumber frees himself or falls from its style to the branch that it is hanging from. So that's Shiva for you. One more thing, in India, Shiva is mostly associated with the Shiva Lingam. Interestingly, in the Rig Veda, the cult of Shiva as just an upstanding stone associated with the phallus is scorned. See, there's a scornful reference to Shishna Deva, those who have the phallus as God. Now you see, Indus civilization was a very big world, much bigger than Mesopotamia. I said there were many different tribes in it. The Vedic tribe was only one. And so clearly, this cult of the Shiva Lingam is not Vedic, but it is Hindu. It was part of the bigger Hindu commonwealth. Then you have another famous face of Shiva as the Lord of the Dance. But now we're coming to our similarity with the Germanic version. You have a wild horde, a band of young warriors surrounding Rudra called the Maruts. They are the wild horde around Rudra. And so you have a similar story around Woden. Let's first explain who Woden is. So Woden is a dark, somber god associated with cold climate and with the air. He's surrounded by animals, Pashupati, namely by 2 wolves and 2 ravens. And he's depicted with a spear. You see here the trident has lost a bit of its shape. The 3 teeth become only 1. But essentially it's the same symbolism. The Romans interpreted Wodan as the same as Mercury, meaning the mystery man, the man of riddles. And the name Wodan is also cognate with the Latin word vates, which means an inspired poet. Like you must have heard about the Vatican. Vaticanus Collis is one of the 7 mountains of Rome, the one where the Vatican, the head of the Catholic Church, is situated. Now, originally this means Vaticanus Collis, the hill of the poets. Okay, so he is the god of the poets, of inspiration, of the higher state of consciousness in which the hymns, like the Vedic hymns, come about. He is depicted as riding through the sky. He's, after all, an atmospheric god. And here he is depicted with the swastika on his shield and holding up the Valknut. Valknut is the knot of the fallen, literally, the fallen on a battlefield. It's not sure that his name is ancient. I think it was only coined in the 19th century. But the symbol is ancient. So the ancient Shiva is often depicted with these 3 intertwined triangles that correspond to Triguna in Hinduism. Then the 3rd eye is also there. Shiva is depicted with a 3rd eye. Now, both in Greek and in Germanic traditions, you find the 3rd eye. Polyphemus, the one who gets blinded by Odysseus, he has a 3rd eye here. He's mocked for it and so on. The symbolism of the 3rd eye is no longer understood. The Greeks have forgotten about yoga. So this simply becomes a cartoonish sort of theme that they don't understand anymore. Woden is depicted with 1 eye. So again, they have forgotten the whole symbolism of the 3rd eye. So there the story becomes that he has 2 eyes and he has sacrificed 1 eye in order to gain wisdom. So the 3rd eye is still associated with wisdom, with higher consciousness. Among the Irish heroes, it is Cuchulainn, who is depicted as 1 eye. And in Greece, Zeus is called Triophthalmos, the one with the 3 eyes. Woden acquires secret knowledge of the runes. The runes is the Germanic alphabet of 24 letters, 24 divided in 3 times 8, which in the Vedas is a very important number. 3 times 8 is the verse Gayatri. Means a verse divided in 3 times 8. So you have 8 syllables, 8 more and 8 more. And so together they form a 24-letter verse, the Gayatri. So the runic alphabet is structured the same way. Now, Woden comes to know this after acquiring wisdom. And to do this, he sacrifices 1 eye. He becomes one-eyed, which really means 3rd-eyed. And he has to hang in a tree for 9 nights. Now, hanging in a tree is a very ancient yogic pose. It's a bat pose. hanging upside down from the branch of a tree. Like, for instance, you have the epic Ramayana, where Shambhuka practices this ascetic exercise. Then 9 nights is also no coincidence. 9 is, of course, the number you find in the Valknut, 3 times 3. It's a very sacred number throughout the Indo-European and in fact throughout the Eurasian world. Like you have the sacred square, the magic square of 3 times 3. 9 is mostly used as a mystic number of the female counterpart of Shiva. You see, Durga is associated with the number 9. She has a special symbol of 3 intertwined lines of 4 units. And so together they are 9 units. There is also a festival for Durga, the Navaratri, the 9 nights. And so Durga is the female counterpart of Shiva. Now here we are back to the wild horde. You see, we had the Maruts in India. Well, here you have the wild horde around Woden. They come alive in the dark season, the one that is now, I'm speaking here on 18th of December, that is now about over. So the season when the nights are long and becoming even longer, you know, November, December. And so you could consider them as the dead who return. You know, the gates between life and death are open in this dark part of the year. So the dead return. They are the wild horde. In a reincarnation perspective, it's the children who are the wild horde, because who are the children? Well, they are the dead people reborn. And so it's the children who have a good time on Halloween. Halloween is the beginning of the 1/8 of the year when the nights are long and becoming even longer, the really darkest part of the year. And so the members of the wild horde have the prerogative of being allowed to come into your home and steal something. And so this is enacted playfully on Halloween by the children who threaten trick or treat. You see, either you give them something or they take it themselves, but then it won't be so pleasant, right? So treat is if you do the giving, or trick is if they have to do the taking. So in India, this habit doesn't exist anymore to the extent that I know, but so in the Vedas, it is still described. Now in my country, you have a feast on the 6th of December, Sinterklaas, which is a bit different from the American adaptation, Santa Claus. But so Sinterklaas is a saint who is the Christianized version of Woden. So he also goes through the air on a horse, and he has a wild horde around him, you know, the black peats. And so nowadays you see some woke people say, oh, this is a celebration of slavery and so on. It has nothing to do with this. It's much, much older than colonial slavery. Also, the Maruts in India are not depicted as black, but as white. And so the color is not that important. Blackness in this case means that they come from the mystery world. They come from the other side. But so it's a very popular festival. It goes back to Woden, and from Woden it goes back all the way to Rudra, right? So that's a common festival that still exists and that shows roots that are common to the Germanic tradition and to the Hindu tradition. Right, I've been talking for long enough, so I'd like to open the floor now to questions or objections, because you're totally welcome to disagree with me.
Any questions, please? Please ask him. Any questions you have, you can ask him. Anybody who's raising hand, I will request him to ask the question. Please raise your hand. Anyone, any question, please?
I have one question, Mathurji.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for your very thought-provoking talk. I have just one query or comment rather. Do you think that if, as far as I know, about 90% of European literature, world literature, and about 99% of Latin literature was destroyed by the Christians? So do you think that that literature, if that was available to you, your research or scholars like you, their research would have been much, much easier and to arrive at some kind of definite conclusions? Thank you.
Yeah, well, yes, quite a bit was destroyed, but quite a bit was left over. And so the last decades have seen a lot of research into these sources. And so much more has come to light. Moreover, it's not black and white. You see, there are cases, of course, where the Christian missionaries, for instance, set the library of Alexandria on fire. Similar things with Muslims also destroying all the heritage. But the missionaries were not uniformly of that type. Like most of the Germanic traditions have been preserved in the Edda. And the Edda is a collection of poems, just like the Vedas, but that have been edited or at least put together by a Christian missionary. Snorri Sturluson, in the 12th or so century. So already Scandinavia had become largely Christianized, and he took it upon himself to save the old traditions. Of course, you have to be careful. Some Christian elements may have already been inserted in those traditions. You have to be careful. But nevertheless, clearly, there was a wish on the part of the Christians to preserve at least a memory of what went before. Like, for instance, we have the goddess Ostara. Ostara, the name Ostara is related to Usha in the Vedas, the dawn goddess. So we know very little about her, and she would have been totally forgotten had it not been for a few Christian missionaries who registered her memory. So the picture is not entirely black and white. So yes, a lot has been lost, but enough has been preserved. There is also a difference between the different traditions, like of the Irish tradition. Well, we know that the Druids were very secretive. They didn't write down anything. Even when they became literate, when they borrowed the Greek alphabet, we have commercial texts and so on. But the real secret of the religious tradition, that was kept secret. And so when the Druids were killed or converted, those traditions got irretrievably lost, which has some consequences because you see in Europe, some people, not all, but some people are a bit ethnically proud, and they don't want to just borrow spiritual traditions from India or from China or from Tibet, you know, they would like to have some real ancestral traditions. Now there I have to disappoint them. You see, here in the case of a similarity of local traditions with Indian traditions, you're not lost because you can take the help from the parallel Indian traditions to understand what is there and to fill in the blanks. Now, in the case of Ireland and the Druids, well, we really have nothing. And so apart from generally affirming, you see, this spirituality was also present among the Druids, in practice, you cannot do anything else than borrow from India. So, you know, that fact, we just have to accept that the best preservation of the spiritual tradition, no matter how universal they may have been, but the best preservation was in India, period.
Okay, I think one more question is from Sheilaji. Please go ahead, Sheilaji.
Namaste, Dr. Elst.
Yes.
As your presentations are fascinating. They give us an insight into the links between India and the rest of the world. The question I have pertains to the current position. It always puzzles me that when knowledge is borrowed from India, or maybe rediscovered and exported from India, the Western adherents are very, very reluctant to attribute the source of their knowledge and inspiration. They are very quick to distance themselves. For example, like the British School of Yoga, which says it has nothing to do with Indian yoga, and is evolving and developing by itself. And I wonder whether there might be some latent kind of ethnic supremacy about that attitude.
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. I know what you're talking about. Look, to explain where I come from, I am a board member of the Belgian Yoga Federation and active in the European Yoga Federation. That is very particular about honoring Indian masters, about having their lessons complete with all the Sanskrit terminology, with explanations about where things comes from, which Indian gurus and so on. But I am therefore acutely aware that there are many yoga schools that don't do this. And so they, it's not that they think Indians are, what is it here, dirty, smelly, ugly black people in the backward country called India. There are a few very specific reasons for keeping Hinduism at a distance. And so maybe 100 years ago, racism was there, you see, but that's not the reason today. As I know that people of my generation, there are a few other things have replaced this. Or the idea that India is idolatrous and so on, you see, in the Christian age 100 years ago, that of course was a consideration. Today, it's not a consideration anymore. However, there are other things that, you know, turn people against Hinduism. And so the main one is caste. You see, people don't know much about Hinduism, but they know in general something about the caste system, that people are born as sweepers and they have to remain sweepers all their lives. And, you know, they can't marry Brahmin girls and so on. That's more or less what people know or think they know. Huh? So they don't know, they don't understand that caste, first of all, is a system of belonging to rather than being excluded from. They also don't know that this has vastly changed, that the legislation has changed and so on. This they all don't know. They vaguely know Hinduism is caste, holy caste, and nothing but caste. And so Mark Tully, the longtime BBC correspondent in Delhi, he once told me, okay, whenever I give a lecture about Hinduism and I say something nice about Hinduism, immediately somebody in the audience will flare up and say, I think Hinduism is a disgusting religion because of the caste system. see, so that's why many people superficially involved with yoga take care to keep a distance from Hinduism. Also, for some, of course, like in America, you have a movement of Christian yoga. There, of course, you also have the idea that, oh, you see, these are evil spirits behind yoga. We have to purify yoga, divorce it from its Hindu background. That's also somewhat there. But mainly is the association with caste, with social injustice. And then what now also comes in is all the TV news about the ugly, vicious, overbearing Hindu majority persecuting the poor, hapless Muslims. Like just today, you see the BBC World here was on. And so they started saying that Muslims are persecuted in India. Apparently some Muslim has been jailed for cheering for Pakistan during a cricket game or something like that. And so, and I mean, nobody would, care to report this in the news program. Some fellow who was jailed for a few months in some distant country, except if it's India. To blacken India, that is very much on the agenda of the BBC or the New York Times or so. So there's also, that's a new element, the association of Hinduism with persecutors of the poor, hapless Muslims. You see, and that's because they project onto India a situation in Europe. You see, here you have more and more Muslim immigrants. And so many people on the woke left side feel honor bound to defend the Muslims. And therefore the Muslims are the good guys and all their enemies, meaning the Hindus, must necessarily be the bad guys. So you have a number of reasons why Hinduism is disliked. And this then has the consequence that people who do yoga tend to take a distance from Hinduism. Now here I have to say, though, that let's say that there are two levels of yoga in the West. And so yoga is becoming very popular. It keeps on growing, keeps on growing, keeps on growing. But more and more people take in the philosophy of yoga. Like, yoga schools all over the West teach a fairly thorough reading of the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita. Some also of the Shiva Sutras, of the Yoga Vasishta and so on, if they're really thorough. But then many more practitioners only go in for health, for breath exercise and whatever, don't take meditation seriously. And so in those circles, there is very little Hinduism inside. And so there you do find this, preferably not talking about Hinduism at all, or if necessary, then to talk against Hinduism. Like, for instance, there's a book about Tantra by some American scholar, Christopher something, where he says explicitly, you see, he explains Kashmiri Shaivism, the 36 tattvas and Shiva and Shakti and everything. And then he says, but this has nothing to do with Hinduism. No, I mean, what is this nonsense? Talking about Shiva and saying that it has nothing to do with Hinduism. But yes, you see, he feels honor bound to keep Shiva, to keep Hinduism at a distance. Because you see, as soon as Hinduism is brought in, then the whole thing becomes fishy and smelly and, compromised. Yeah, so that's the situation.
Thank you so much for that very balanced, mature perception and sharing that with me and for the rest of the audience. Just an observation I have, I was on a webinar where they were talking about in the Caribbean and South Africa, the influences of yoga and Ayurveda. And there was quite a prominent Ayurveda lecturer who came on. She was of Indo-South African origin. And she began talking about the different poses and the different diets and analysis and so on. And I said to her, as end of question and answer, I said to her, could you explain the links between your lecture and Hindu philosophy? Oh yes, it was transcendental meditation as well.
Yeah.
She was talking. And she said, she looked me straight in the eye via Zoom and said, there is no connection whatsoever. Hinduism has absolutely nothing to do with transcendental meditation.
Yeah.
So I began to challenge her, and she was quite shocked, really, because she hadn't expected to be challenged. So, of course, I accused her of cultural appropriation and hypocrisy, which did not go to the moderator. But even people from that ancestry, that lineage, are so alienated, self-alienated, and deny the connections.
Well, since you use the word lineage, you see, that's the last few years, that's a new phenomenon, especially in America. Non-lineage yoga. That is to say, yoga completely divorced from its Indian sources.
Yes.
And so they say, well, you see, we're not children anymore. We're not followers of the guru. No. We want to do it ourselves. We start from zero and we forget about the lineage.
It's very interesting because something, I mean, this is not apropos your presentation, but there is an organization called School of Philosophy in the UK, and they are also totally divorced from the Hindu tradition because they follow the transcriptions of a particular yogi whom they co-opted into their movement, and they only his lectures and perceptions of the Vedas and Sanskrit and so on. So that is another community which also does not have any links with the Hindu tradition. Yeah,
well, to a large extent, you see, these tendencies are nurtured by tendencies happening inside India. You see, no, I mean, I see very many Hindus are saying, you know, yeah, the secularists and their Western paymasters and their Western handlers and so on. That's anachronistic. You see, long ago, of course, the Indian secularists were a creation of the British, of Thomas Babington, Macaulay, and so on. But that's long ago.
Yes.
You see, if today, for example, we speak English, okay, if even in India, very many events are taking place in English, that's not because the Queen or whoever is imposing English on you. No, that's because the Nehruvian elite in 1965 sabotaged the constitution, which provided for the phasing out of English. And so they wanted to keep English because this gave them a leg over the unwashed masses who don't speak English, who can't compete on the labor market and so on. So that's, you know, there is an element of colonialism, but that's historically true. Today it's Indians themselves who impose this. And so the whole anti-Hindu mood among the elites in India, you know, that has very little connection today with England. And, you know, that's self-sustained. And Indians keep on making it worse. Like, for instance, you have all these Hindu sects who are clamoring, oh, we are not Hindus. Hum Hindu nahi. You have the Sikhs, you have the Ramakrishna Mission, you now have the Arya Samaj, the Veera Shaivas, the Velalars, that's the new thing, Buddhists, Jains, and so on. They're all not Hindus. The Sarna, the tribals in Jharkhand, Donyi Polo, the tribals in Arunachal, and so on. Everybody's leaving Hinduism. You know, the rats are leaving the sinking ship. Now, and so therefore, people in the West who vaguely know about what's happening in India, they join this movement. What to do about it? And so maybe in detail, I'll have to, you know, look for another time to really go into the detail. But in general, I have the answer. You see, you rediscover the greatness of Hinduism. Like, for example, the Vedas. You see, I don't believe the Vedas were revealed by God or anything, like the Quran. No, they are a human creation. However, they were a unique, a fantastic human creation. And so they became a backbone of an intellectual culture learning these texts by heart and so on. Then the interpretation of those texts, the linguistic analysis of these texts led to the creation of the science of linguistics.
Yes.
The altars were built, this led to the creation of geometry, of mathematics. The timing for the rituals that to be decided, this led to astronomy, and so on. So this Vedic edifice, you see, became a beautiful conglomerate of emerging sciences. You know, that's something to be absolutely proud of. And so it's once the greatness of Hinduism is realized again and is taught to the young generations in their education curriculum, that they will, you know, become proud again of being Hindus. And then you see the Sikhs are not going to say, Hum Hindu nahi. No, they're going to say, we are Hindus. We are the best Hindus. That's the competition you're going to get then. So, I mean, I know what the answer is, and now only the question of implementing it.
Thank you so much. As always, I enjoy your presentations very
Thank
much.
you.
So, namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Shailaji. I think we will close this webinar now today. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Dr. Ilse once again and all other participants for joining us today. This was a wonderful presentation and very eye-opener. And we will very soon invite you once again, Doctor. Thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste.